Welcome to Ask the Divorce Whisperer. I'm your host, Marta Papa, and we're so glad that you've joined us for this Facebook Live event where our goal is to demystify divorce. We meet the first and third Friday of every month at 1 p.m. And we go live on my Divorce Whisperer Facebook page, where I interview a divorce expert that you may need in your divorce if you're planning a divorce. And I asked him the following question. If you could give only one piece of advice to a good friend who is going through or considering divorce, what would that advice be? So we start with that question. And then you can ask questions or make comments in the comment section below, and we will try and answer those. Today, I'm going to be speaking with Melissa Gragg. She will be sharing with us how you might need the services of someone with her background, which is financial analysis and a business valuator, if you're getting divorced. If you find this conversation helpful or you want to share it with someone else that's getting divorced, a friend, a family member, you want to share it with them later. By the end of today, we will have this live broadcast on Facebook under the Divorce Whisperer. So if you type in the Divorce Whisperer on Facebook, this will come up. If you also go to my Facebook page for the next day or two, this will be the top thing on the Divorce Whisperer Facebook page also. So you can share information that you think a friend might need. Also, we're having a raffle for my book, 7 Secrets from the Divorce Whisperer, Saving Yourself, Your Money, and Your Children During Divorce. Just complete the Google form that's in the comments below and submit it, and we'll do a drawing. And if your name is drawn, we'll send you a free copy of the book. So today, I'm so excited she's taking the time to join us. I want to welcome Melissa Gragg to this session of Ask the Divorce Whisperer. I'll give you a second to say hello, Melissa.
Thanks, I appreciate being here.
Oh, good. And I usually ask her the question about if you could only give one piece of information, but I'm going to do something different with this expert because she is that important and most people don't know it. So how might couples get divorced in a situation where they need a financial analyst or a valuation expert? And when I talk about that with clients, they often say, well, we're not rich, so we don't need that. So it's associated with rich people, with wealthier people. And that's not true. The common Joe, you and me, we may need a financial analyst. And I'm going to give you 3 areas where I always use a financial analyst. I insist on it, even when I'm mediating or litigating and or going to trial, because they are so important in this. And so I'm giving you these 3 at the very beginning before Melissa even gets to talk, because I don't want you to sign out of this session thinking, oh, this is for rich people. It's not for rich people. It's for you and me. So here's where a financial analyst is just mandatory. All right. If you're entitled to maintenance or child support, or you might be obligated to pay maintenance or child support, you need a financial analyst, because they're going to figure out your cash flow per month and what the tax consequences are on that, so that you don't get stuck not having enough money every month, either paying maintenance and child support or receiving it. So they're very important in that case. And you don't have to be rich to be entitled to child support or maintenance or obligated to pay it. The second one is, if you have a business, even Mary Kay, even a candle business, even, you're like, oh, that's so small. I have somebody that has a crystal business Etsy. You know what? That needs to be valued. That needs to be valued. So most people don't think so, but it does. And so you need a financial analyst to do that, or a business evaluation analyst to do that. And then the third one, I think this is the most important, all right? The third one is you could need a financial analyst to help you determine how to divide simple property, just simple property between spouses, taking the tax consequences into consideration. And so here's the example that I give to help clients see, oh my gosh, we do. We need a financial analyst. And by the way, I don't get back pay from the financial analyst or a kickback, or I have no reason to suggest this person to you. I don't make any more or any less money. It just makes sure hiring such a person as Melissa, make sure you're getting what you're really entitled to. And I can't do what she does. And so I can't tell you what you're really entitled to. So just to determine the most simple division of property, because if you go to court and a judge divides your assets and the law says it's going to be 50-50, here's how the judge's mind works, right? And it's not accurate, right? It's not accurate. But the judge sees $10,000 in the ATM drive-through that you take out of your bank account. You've already paid taxes on it. It's just sitting there, same as sitting in your top drawer in socks, okay? $10,000 cash, the same as $10,000 worth of equity in your car. Well, to get that, you have to sell your car. You have to sell it for the right amount of money and get that $10,000. And now you don't have a car. That's way different than I got a car and I got $10,000 in socks, right? So those aren't the same, but a judge sees them exactly the same, right? And that 10,000 equity in your car is not the same as $10,000 in equity in IRAs, 401ks, any kind of retirement, because you're going to pay taxes on the increase in value of that retirement. And the judge pretends to be blind to that. The judge knows that, but the judge doesn't want to pretend to be an accountant. And so they just refuse to tax consequence things, right? They just refuse. They're like, oh, that involves tax consequences. $10,000 in your sock equals $10,000 in your car equals $10,000 in IRAs. And if you bought IBM, let's say IBM is $100 a share, just making it up. If you bought IBM when it was $5 a share and now it's $100 a share, if you take 100 shares of IBM and you first bought it at $5 a share, and your spouse takes $100, you can't even get $100 of Microsoft, can you? $100 of Lawn Doctor, I don't know, and you just bought it, and you bought it for $95 a share, and now it's up to 100. Well, there's 100 shares. The judge says 100 shares of IBM, 100 shares of True Green lawn shares. That's the same. No, it's not. IBM, you're paying tons of taxes on that before you get that money in your pocket. And with the lawn service, you hardly have to pay any money in taxes, because you just bought it and it hasn't gone up more than $5 in value. And so you hardly have any taxes on it. So that's why a financial expert or a financial valuation person may be absolutely mandatory in your case. And you're a plumber and a teacher, and you thought, I don't need a business valuation expert or a financial analyst. Yes, you do. All right. So enough of the lecturing. I just wanted that at the beginning, so you didn't sign out thinking, this is for rich people. No, it's not. No, it's not. And Melissa is going to teach you what she does, where she comes in a case in helping. Really, what she does is help make sure that you've gotten your fair share of the property or the money or the retirement. That 10,000 does not equal $10,000. And so she tax analyzes it and makes sure it's the right amount. And she values businesses. Oh, that Mary Kay business isn't worth anything. Those crystals on the internet isn't worth anything. Oh, really? Really? So let's look at the last 3 years of how much you've made on that. And you have really no overhead, no employees, and oh, that's just pure cash coming in. That's just pure profit. Let's see if the judge thinks that's worth value. Yeah, he or she does. And so that's when you need somebody like Melissa. So getting off that subject for a minute and asking the expert the question that I always ask at the beginning is, if you had somebody you really cared about and they were facing divorce and you could only give them one piece of information, of advice, what would that advice be?
That's a great question. I think that there are a couple pieces of advice that I would give, but the primary one, and kind of why we're here today, is to consider mediation as an option for your divorce. So I am an expert and typically will go to court and be on one side, or sometimes I work for both parties. But a lot of times, if you get to the courthouse, you're not really in control of how things are going to be split anymore.
Mhm.
So even if one of you wanted the house and maybe the other didn't, the judge could order it to be sold. So mediation kind of gives you a little bit more control.
Mhm.
Typically when, and Marta is an attorney that mediates, and you also have other types of people that will mediate, but attorneys like Marta will bring financial people into the situation and kind of come in at the middle. Part of it is because of the dollars and cents, but the other is there's always going to be financial issues that you're going to disagree about.
Yeah.
And so we can give a perspective from, well, we're in mediation, and you can certainly decide how you want to do that. Here's the reference point, what could happen in court if you went to court for this issue. And then sometimes it is a gray issue. I received an inheritance and we put some money over here and we put some money over here. Or what do I do with the engagement ring? Or I'm unhappy with, some situation. The reality is, a lot of times divorce is obviously, there are a lot of issues involved, but sometimes communication is an issue and knowing the financial picture. So a lot of
Yeah.
times we're coming in and helping both people equally understand the financial picture so that they can make decisions. And that's kind of how, yeah.
Can I stop you there? Because I think that's so important when you say both people equally understand the financial situation. So how is it that both people might not equally understand the finances of their marriage?
Well, I think that typically, or sometimes there's like one person that is in control of paying the bills or the finances or knows where all the bank accounts are. And then there's another person that might, have other duties and roles in that particular situation. And so you have a disconnect, of an understanding of like, what do we have in retirement? What is the business worth? And
Mhm.
part of my goal and my kind of purpose to be involved is to say, okay, let's look at the house. What is it worth? How much do we owe? Can you go, and if it's in one person's name, can the other person even get the loan or put it in their name? Could they actually financially afford it? And
Mhm.
so a lot of times we're just coming in and saying, okay, here's the reality of the house or the cars or the retirement. What is important to you? And once they say, oh, I didn't realize how expensive the house is, maybe it's not going to be the right choice for me. So I think that, I think where mediation comes in is it allows the both people to make decisions. And if we come in as, an attorney and a financial person, I think normally we can say, okay, well, from a legal standpoint, this is what you should consider. And from a financial standpoint, this is what you consider. Stock options are a significant issue. They could be vested, which means they're maybe could be used. They could be vested in the future. Is there value? So a lot of times one person might say, yes, they're worth so much money, and the other person might say they're worth nothing. Well, when we come into it, we're not really on either person's side.
Right.
We're just saying, okay, let's look at this. This is what the court is going to look at. This is what a financial person would look at. And then here's maybe if you had a different financial person come in, they might see it a little bit differently. So we're really I feel like a lot of mediation is having really frank conversations about money. And sometimes that's the first time that that's happened. And so there's some learning curve about, I don't even know what a stock option is, or even simply retirement, a 401k. Somebody might say, well, my wife has this 401k and it's got $100,000 in it, but I can't even, I guess we can't even give me any of it, and so it's just breaking down. Well, yes, you can actually split it with no financial consequences, and it's called a quadro, and they're like, well, what's that? So it's like, I don't want to pay taxes. I don't want to ruin our retirement. But so that's when we come in and kind of educate on like, well, there are ways to do this in the context of a divorce, and here are your options.
Mm-hmm. One thing I find is really helpful that you do is bring in information without blowing up the mediation, right? And so if I think husband or wife is harboring information or not totally coming clean with stock options versus a stock right in the future, a little bit different than a stock option, versus delaying getting paid salary until 5 years from now. And they've never discussed it with their spouse, and their spouse is a stay-at-home spouse, or their spouse works at a gardening center, or, they just don't have that information because a boss or a company, someone they work for, is not filling them with that information. I mean, the person that understands the stock options or deferred compensation, where are they getting that information? Their employer's offering it to them. And the employer's lawyers are having meetings with these people and saying, this is how it benefits you. Do you want to get into it? Do you want to do that? And the other spouse not invited to that meeting and doesn't even know that meeting happened. Hello. So as a mediator, I have to be really neutral. And so if I start asking more questions of one person than the other, they kind of get nervous. If I just spend a little more time with one person than the other, they get nervous. Well, clearly you're on his side, or clearly you're on her side because you spent more time talking to them. I'm like, no, really, it's the opposite. I'm trying to get them to disclose information to you because you need it. All right. So, but they get all bent out of shape. You spent 5 minutes with her. Aren't you going to spend 5 minutes with me? And when I bring someone in like you, they don't they don't seem to have those expectations. It's sort of like you're talking to both of them at the same time. And one might understand at a really deep level what you're talking about. And the other person is like, woo, way over their head, but you're talking to both of them at the same time. And so they don't have this, oh, you're on somebody's side kind of thing. And you bring up things that people don't want to be brought up. And so that keeps them from getting mad at me. Oh, you're on their side because you brought up XYZ. You're the kind of the bad guy. You brought that up. Like, now you need to know this about, stock splits, right? You're the one bringing it up, and you don't represent either one of them. Neither do I. But you haven't been meeting with them for them to decide if you're fair or not. You're just this encyclopedia of information coming in and spitting out information about, here's how we handle this, here's how this gets taxed deferred. You're just explaining it to them, and what their options are and describing what their assets are. And they don't feel you're on one person's side than the other. And yet both parties get the information that I know as the attorney mediator they need to have, or they shouldn't be in mediation. If they can't understand what they're dividing, then they need a lawyer to step in and divide it for them. But before you go hire that lawyer, hire a financial analyst that comes in and explains it to them. They're not stupid, just no one ever explained it to them, and their spouse kind of kept it a secret too. So you're the beacon of light that comes into the room without prejudice and without being on anybody's side, and you have no reason to lie to them. You're not getting any kickback. You don't care if husband takes it, wife takes it. You have no reason to lie to them. You're just a source of really important information that they both need to understand. And that's how you're so helpful to the lawyer or so helpful to the mediator. You're helpful, whether it's litigation or mediation. You're so helpful. Thank you.
Well, and I think that when couples are talking about financial things, we sort of have, and we have this in divorce all the time, we have his story, her story, and then the reality is somewhere in the middle. So when we're looking at these things,
Great point.
When we're looking at these things, sometimes they'll be like, well, I don't know if I want to talk about the house yet because we're going to save that for the negotiation. Or I don't know if I want to talk about this. We're going to save that. And so I kind of come in and say, no, let's talk about the house. And I was like, well, and right now we're in COVID. So house prices are a little bit crazy. Yeah. But somebody might say, well, I think it's worth this and I think it's worth this. And I say, okay, we're going to talk about the house and get it to a number that you would take it or you would leave it. So you would be willing to pay that for it and you'd be willing to be paid for it. And when you can start to talk about that for every single financial issue as a standalone issue, then we put it all together and we're not hedging our bet. We're not saying, oh, well, I want the house to be worth more because you're going to keep it. I mean, I want it to be less because I'm going to keep it. I mean, I want it to be fair. We start to not really want to be fair. We want to position ourselves. And so I think our role in a mediation is to come in and say, okay, we're going to talk about each asset separately. And we're going to talk about what it means in mediation, in litigation, or what does it mean to your family, right? Yeah. And sometimes there's not a right or wrong answer. It's like, for the family, maybe I would want to stay in the house, but the other person can afford it and the kids want to stay in it and I can live close, there's always options. But I think that there's been times where a client will be like, well, I think it should be like that. And I said, so do you know that lowers the value? And for all intents and purposes, it's not in your favor. And they'll be like, oh, well, then then I don't want to talk about that. Right. So sometimes they think that
Yeah.
whatever information they're withholding
Yeah.
is going to
Mhm.
matter and it's going to be in their favor. And sometimes
Yeah.
it's not. So it's
Yeah.
like, let's just be really upfront. Let's
Yep.
talk about this and be honest. And then at the end of the day, I think that people, when they get, we kind of split things. That's the other thing. Like, we don't have to split everything 50-50. You can have something and the other person can have something else. And it's okay as long as the whole bucket starts to become equitable.
That's
We talk a lot about judges don't like fair. Nobody talks about fair.
Mhm.
But people talk to their friends and say, well, I got the house and the retirement and maintenance and this, and I really made out in this situation. So they hear this and they're like, okay, well, I want, like, this isn't a used car sales lot. This is your life. These are your assets. And
Mhm.
you can kind of decide whether to spend a lot of money fighting about it, or how about we start to talk about the reality. And the reality
Yeah.
is, most people, when they get divorced, they go from, two earners or one earner and one household, and then they have to split it up. So there is that piece that you might have to look at how you live a little bit differently. And I
Yeah.
think that those are hard conversations, but if we
Yeah.
can be truthful with each other
Mhm.
and disclose the information, then we can make decisions that make sense for the family.
Mhm. Yes. Totally agree. Totally agree.
So that's
And
kind of where we come into the picture.
yeah, and I agree that sometimes people play games even in mediation, and so they're running a game in their head and they think they can trick their spouse. And when I call it like, oh, no, 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 then I'm on their spouse's side and I'm against them and they want to quit mediation, right? But when a neutral like you comes in and this is your expertise and you call it, oh, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure why you think that, because here's how we value that of it, and here's the future value of it, or whatever, then they get caught and they kind of have to eat some humble pie and they get caught and they let go of the fantasy that they're going to pull one over on their spouse. And as I said, I don't know if I've ever used that phrase before, but you're the beacon of light, of truth that comes into the room and and shines the reality on both people, especially when they say, well, the statute says that I need to be living at the same standard of living during the marriage. I'm like, yeah, the statute says that, but if husband makes $100,000 and wife is a stay-at-home mom, nobody gets to live at $100,000 standard of living. You're both going to be living at a $50,000 standard of living, and there's going to be tax consequences on that. And so that's just how it's going to be. That's how it's going to be. You can't all of a sudden magically provide another $100,000 unless you saved half of every paycheck. Nobody does that. And you really only lived on $50,000 net, and the other $50,000 you put away and you have that, and you're used to living on 50,000. Now that's not a big change, but Americans don't do that. A lot of foreigners do that. A lot of people from Germany or people from Sweden come and they want to talk about their holiday. They want to talk about that 6-week holiday. They don't want to take it with their kids. They're like, the 6-week holiday away from my children. When you have to take care of the children and I get to travel, all right? They're more worried talking about that than the value of the house or the value of the car. They have a kind of a different value system, and they're more interested in getting that time off than they are getting 50% of the car. And you have to kind of go with them that here's what's really important to them. If you had to rate things 1 to 10, what would be the most important? Well, if they both put holiday as the most important, you better start talking about that. That's going to be one of the things they fight over the most. And somewhere in the middle, their assets and their IRAs and the amount of money they make is going to come into the conversation. But I see some real diversity based on people's backgrounds of, again, a German couple, they came in, they had one credit card. They're like, why would you need two?
Right.
Like, does wife have a credit card and husband have a credit card? No.
Well,
we have one.
And I think that,
Why would you need more than one credit card? Because they don't put anything on credit. They pay cash for everything. It's a cultural difference. So you just need to be ready. You need to be ready, and they may want to talk about things that you never thought about as a mediator, and hence I need to bring in an expert on that, who knows more than I know about that, so that when they're negotiating that item, they're doing it fairly.
Sure. Well, and I think that, typically when people are getting divorced, there is trust issues in some capacity. So everything that comes out of that person's mouth is not going to be, you're just going to have this like feeling of not trusting what they say. And when I come into it, I'm assuming that people are going to tell me the truth. And, or what we should understand is I do this for a living. So I can sometimes spot when there are things that don't make sense.
Yes.
Maybe faster than other people can.
Yes.
But the reality is I'm saying, okay, when you, and because we do a lot of business valuations and people give us the information that we're like, but we need more. Like I need the whole tax return, not just like the first page or your Schedule C, It's usually because sometimes it's the first time they're getting divorced. Like they don't know what they're not disclosing. So I kind of approach it as everybody's trying to be truthful. They may not know everything that they have to provide. And then if one person says, well, I don't know about this asset, like I have never seen this bank account, what was it used for? What happened? They're hiding money. I kind of go in and say, okay, other party, what is really going on with this bank account? So I try to get to the truth and understand what it is, and then come back and say, I know there's some trust going on here, but I feel comfortable with what I've looked at, right? I might go a little deeper and look at something, and I'm like, I feel comfortable, and that's the role of the financial person or the financial neutral, is to come in and say, okay, let's look at this. Let's ask the right questions, and then let's get the answers. And if I sufficiently feel the answers are right, then I have to communicate what I know and what I've learned to the one person that may not have a financial background. They may not really even understand how to balance a checkbook, but there's a way to communicate the reality in the situation so that they have enough information to say, okay, that does make sense. And I think I understand. And based on that, I could make a decision that I feel would be best for me. And that's really the goal. I can't determine what is the best decision.
Right.
But I can make sure that everybody is on a level playing field so that they both can see the financial picture and then choose the things that are most important to them, basically.
And I think that is one of the most important roles that you play in asking questions that the underempowered or that the spouse who doesn't have that knowledge, they don't even know to ask those questions. And so the other person doesn't answer those questions. So you come in, you ask the right questions that the person doesn't even know to ask, and then they don't really understand what the answer is, what is the impact of that answer. And you can explain all that to them because you're the teacher. You're the expert in the room. You aren't trying to get something from one person to the other. It really breaks down the distrust. I find someone like you really break down the distrust between Jack and Jill, between husband and wife, or wife and wife, husband, husband, whatever the relationship is. You break down that distrust and say, here's how it really works. Do you both understand that? Okay, understanding that, how do you want to divide this asset? And you ask the questions that the other spouse is afraid to ask, or the attorney's afraid to ask because the other person, that client keeps getting mad every time the attorney asks another question, saying, whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? And you just come in, you're the neutral that needs to know the information, and you build up trust in the room, which is really important.
Well, and
So,
I think people get a little confused with mediation. They think, okay, mediation, everybody's going to be happy and hold hands, and we're going to figure it out. Mediation is a safe space to get clarity on what you never knew, and to have really frank discussions that are uncomfortable, but they don't have to be difficult, right? They can be uncomfortable because maybe we never talked about this, but we can talk about it and we can get through it and then know something at the end. So it's not about like, oh, John doesn't want to talk about that priceless piece of art, and Mary doesn't want to talk about, that there's some amount that was given to her by her father and she really thinks that it should just be hers. Like, it's better to say, okay, what are all the issues? Like, let's just talk about all of them in the first meeting, right?
Right.
Oh, this, and then we can start to dissect each of the issues.
Yep.
And sometimes they might bring up something and we might say, okay, well, that's a very clear black and white issue. Here it is. Here's another clear black and white issue, and here's some gray. And that's where the couple gets the power and the control to decide how we deal with the gray areas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're almost out of time. Do you have any last minute piece of advice for anyone? You don't have to, but if you do, this would be your opportunity to give it.
Sure. I think that, going into divorce, the method or the way or the outcome is all based on the energy and the way that you think it's going to happen. And so if you go into it thinking that it's going to be horrible and I'm going to get screwed, or that person's going to get everything, then that's what's going to happen. Whereas if you go in and say, you know what, we're both going to be honest that this is difficult because, we're going to have to figure out how to afford our new lives separately. And we just say, we have a family unit that a lot of times people still care about, so how do we make some decisions and maybe focus on that the outcome or the ending could be okay. Like, we will be okay if we can just honestly talk about what is important to us, and that it doesn't have to be horrible. And I think if you set that mindset of like, you know what, I'm going to be open, I'm going to listen, and I'm going to be truthful, then a lot of times that outcome is like, okay, this is good. This is okay. I like this.
Yes.
And I think it's in the mindset of going into it, and it's letting go some of those past things that you've held on to that are maybe the reasons that you're getting divorced. But it's a good time to kind of move on to that, from that.
I think that's a great point to point out that you may be defining your own destiny by your preconditions, by your preconceived notions of what's going to happen in mediation, and how on guard you need to be what you're going to disclose, what you're not going to disclose. And then the other person is telling the truth. They're just laying it flat out. And since you're not, you think you project onto them what you're doing, right? So you think, well, if I'm doing this, you're probably doing that, and they aren't. So yeah, I really agree with that's very esocentric, but I really agree with that sometimes you create your own future. You create your own future. And if you don't play fair, it's not going to come out fair. And it may not come out fair on your end. You may be getting the short end of the stick instead of the other person. So you're a lot better off to lay it on the line, to not hide anything and lay it on the line. And then you decide what you're going to pick from that treasure trove. And your spouse is going to decide what they pick from that treasure trove. And we're going to add it all up and see if it looks equitable or not, because that's what we need for the judge to sign off on it. So yeah, great, very forward thinking point on your behalf. Very forward thinking.
Well, thanks for having me, Marta. I appreciate it.
Tell people, so people might want to talk to you who are considering divorce and get your information about it, get information about divorce. And so tell them how they can reach you.
Sure. So my name is Melissa Gragg. I own a company called Bridge Valuation Partners, and we specialize in business valuations and complex financial issues in divorce and partner disputes and litigation. And you can reach me at bridgevaluation.com or melissa@bridgevaluation.com. And you can Google and get my cell phone number. It's pretty much everybody has it, but it's 314-541-8163. And I usually will talk to people kind of complimentary for a half an hour, an hour, just to talk through, like, can we be of value to a couple? And what does that look like? What does it cost? What's included? And a lot of times I want to get everybody on the same page before we actually make a decision to move forward. So I'm more than willing to answer questions and kind of give them a summary of what this looks like, because every situation is different. So
yeah, that's great. And when we move this over to YouTube, we're going to have her contact information, her name and her contact information there, so you can get it from there also. But I wanted you to give them a phone number so they could call you if they have specific questions, because you may have just cracked open a whole new thing. They've been thinking about getting divorced, or thinking about it, and you just cracked open a whole new universe for them, a new coconut for them.
Right.
And they don't know what's in that coconut, and they need somebody to help them. They need somebody to help them. And that's what you can do. And that's what you do. You do. So thank you again to Melissa. We so appreciate your help. And we'll be back on Ask the Divorce Whisperer in 2 weeks. Not sure what the date is on that, in 2 weeks. And we're going to be talking to Mary Massey at that time, who is a realtor who can talk to us about why people are getting $100,000 more than what they asked for their house right now. And whether you want to take advantage of that during a divorce, or not take advantage of that during a divorce, or even if you aren't getting divorced, she's going to break down some of the bizarre things that are happening, and whether you want to get in on that or you want to steer clear of that. So she'll be answering those kinds of questions. And again, we thank you so much, Melissa, for your information. And she's willing to give you more information if you just give her a call.
Thank you so much, Marta. I appreciate the invite.
Okay, thanks so much. Have a great 2 weeks, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Bye.